Among teenagers in the United States, suicide is the second leading cause of death. As part of our segment during Suicide Awareness Month, we hear from a provider with a focus on mental health for adolescents. We'd like to welcome the medical director of the McLean Franciscan Community-Based Acute Treatment Programs at Franciscan Children's, Dr. Anthony Sossong. Thank you very much for being with us, Doctor.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
The high ranking as a death factor for teenagers, I guess this is a world pattern. So why is the teenagers so much at risk for suicide?
So it's a really good question, and it is an international phenomenon, and I would say epidemic. It was a few years ago the third leading cause, and has now jumped to being the second leading cause of death in kids 10 to 24. So it's throughout the teen years and into the early 20s. Part of that we understand to be the relative immaturity of the teen brain. The brain matures last in the prefrontal cortex, and the part of the brain that puts the brakes on. And when you think about some of the impulsive and emotional periods and ideas and the experiences of youth, they're pretty turbulent. And so with that comes some dangerous times. Without the brakes, things get more dangerous.
Well, I guess there are all kinds of factors. Some of them can be internal because there might be an underlying mental health issue as well in the mix. Couldn't that be the case?
Yeah, when we look back at people who have committed suicide, we find that about 90% of them had a diagnosed or undiagnosed psychiatric illness, meaning we can see signs and symptoms of psychiatric illness in 90% of people who commit suicide. Disorders that are quite treatable.
Now, I also imagine some more external factors. Let's say that there could be turbulence in the family, maybe some struggle overcoming to terms with sexual orientation. Have these come to play before?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you mentioned sexual orientation. LGBTQ youth are much more likely to act on suicidal thoughts. That feeling of connectedness and belonging early in life is really part of the family, and as we get into the teen years, the social and peer groups really provide a lot of that structure. So during the teens, a breakup can be phenomenally devastating.
Well, I remember looking back to my own teens. I mean, there was almost this pathological desire to be connected and accepted. But I guess what also happens here now is you get social media. I mean, what does that do to the mix?
That's a great question, because with social media comes the same sort of patterns of development as we see in the life of the teen. So there's a theory called the co-construction model, which is to say that interactions on social media reflect the kinds of interactions and the developmental challenges that a teen is having in his or her own life outside of social media. There are some technical factors about social media that make it more dangerous, though. There's the possibility that a shaming conversation or a very embarrassing sort of encounter or conversation or activity can be captured and sent to a whole peer group very quickly. That can be just very destructive emotionally for a child or teen. The second is that you mentioned the desire to be part of a group and that feeling of devastation when interactions don't go well in a social group. But imagine what would happen if you were interacting with an entire peer group in your own home late at night when you're tired and hungry and more prone to act on impulsive thoughts.
Well, you might have an adolescent who's had that experience. You've got this viral bullying going on. I mean, how do you dissipate that?
The same way that it depends on what part of the bullying you're talking about. If you're talking about early bullying, where it's first becoming a little bit of a problem, really prevention is key. But at some point, if the bullying or the social targeting becomes so severe that it really is inescapable, there absolutely should be things done at the school level, and the parents should be involved even at the law enforcement level.
This is BNN News, and we're talking with Dr. Anthony Sossong from Franciscan Children's. Doctor, you mentioned families. I guess maybe prevention and treatment. It sort of begins with the family. So what should they be looking for?
It's a tough thing. A lot of the two questions I get most frequently are, what should I do about social media, and what are the things I should look at given the vicissitudes of adolescence and the turbulence there. I've put together a little acronym that helps me remember the things as I talk with parents, and it's CHAT, which is a little bit of a spoiler about what I'm going to talk about in terms of what parents can do. But C for changes in mood, appetite, sleep, any sort of abrupt changes that are really out of character. H for a hopelessness, a worthlessness, or even a lack of interest in things that the kid used to do. Activities, in addition to withdrawing from activities that they liked, new engagement in or an increase in substance use, any kind of risky behaviors like driving quickly or engagement in things that could really cause harm. And T, talking about death. Talking about death and suicide should never be overlooked or ignored by a parent.
Well, with many health problems, part of the healing is sharing experiences with other people who've been affected. Is this what teens do who are suicidal as well?
Yeah, I think that sharing of experiences is one of the major developmental milestones in the teens. But that's also the main challenge of parenting a teen, is to take the way that we as parents understand the world and think about the world. And instead of having our own external presence, to help the child understand where we come from and start to internalize that way of thinking about things. What's so important to remember is that despite that worry that we're protecting, the feeling that we want to protect a child from talking about suicide, or that worry that by talking about suicide it'll make it more likely, it turns out that talking about suicide is one of the most protective things that we can do as adults in the community or as parents.
As you mentioned, people who want some more information, you've got a website at Franciscans?
Yeah, franciscanchildrens.org. We have a lot of resources there. Also, I'd refer people to the National Alliance on Mental Illness, NAMI.org.
Thank you very much for being with us.
Okay, thank you very much.
Dr. Anthony Sossong from Franciscan Children's.